Good morning. Good morning. Well, first of all, I just want to thank everybody for being here. It's an honor to have your attendance, and it looks like we've got a perfect turnout. My name is Brian Gilroy, and I am the co-founder of WildLife Partners, along with my brother, who is at the A&M baseball game. So we've been trying to, I guess you could say, crack the code on what is the best way to go about doing this. Our goal, when we started doing these, this is our third educational seminar, and our goal is simply to provide transparency, openness, the free flow of information within the industry, because it's our belief that the industry as a whole is going to be more successful long-term if we are willing to share our secrets. And historically, that wasn't the theme in our industry. People were very reluctant to share things like dosing information for catching animals, feed information. It was just a it was a tight-lipped group of people that really didn't spend a lot of time helping each other out. And we've really tried to work at changing that. And so we're trying to crack the code on what is the best way to host these educational events. And so the first one we did was at the JW Marriott in a room about 3 times this size. And I think there were probably 150 or 200 people there. The second one we had was at our auction a year or so ago, and it was timed alongside the Kentucky Derby, and we had a lot of attendance. I think there were 200 or more people. But what I found is that in a really large group of people, it seems there's hesitation to ask questions as we go along. And so our hope is that by hosting this here in a little bit of a smaller venue, that we can get a little more participation from the standpoint of asking questions. We're here for the purpose of learning ourselves, but we're also here for the purpose of helping you all learn so that you can be more successful in your operations. And so as part of all of that, please ask questions. And in addition to that, please share what you learn with other people. I have found through my life that the biggest rewards that I've received have been when I'm trying to help other people and I'm trying to make them better. I find that I end up being more successful with the things I'm doing. And so if you learn something here and you find that it's useful and you find it's beneficial and you find that it allows you to have better success with what you're doing, share it. Tell somebody about it. Be willing to help your neighbor. Be willing to tell the person that that's getting started in this, the mistakes you made. I think that's probably the most important part is where did we screw up? While getting things right is great, it's wonderful to pat yourself on the back and feel good about a job well done, but when you get mud on your face and you lose an animal or you have something go wrong or you make a bad decision or you deal with somebody that you didn't want to deal with, and you learn from that, save your neighbor the hassle. Save your friend the problem that you ran into, but more importantly, save the animal the grief of having to go through whatever misery it went through at your hand. And so I think that's really our goal in putting this together. We don't make any money for doing this. We're not here trying to sell anything. We're just simply trying to create an environment of open flow of information, to attract great speakers that have tremendous knowledge. And whether you are a highly educated PhD or whether you're a redneck that just figured out how to weld, you probably have something to offer in this industry. And so we want to incorporate a little bit of all of that. We have a different predator speaker today than we've had in the past, but for those of you that know Daryl's a great friend of mine. He's as raw gets, and he's fun to listen to. He's highly knowledgeable when it comes to predators, and he's brought just a tremendous amount of help to people in the exotic wildlife industry. And so whether you're Daryl or whether you're Dr. Moorfeld, we just feel that there's a place for knowledge for everybody. And so I'll kind of sum it up by saying, once again, if you learn something, share it with somebody else. That's the point of being here. So with that said, I'm going to talk just briefly about the lineup of speakers that we have today. And um, Katie handles all of our events. She handles our auctions, and she handles the days of education, and she handles just everything under the sun that my brother and I create as disasters for her to go clean up. And so she's in conjunction with Kelsey and Crystal. They put this whole thing together. They played a huge role in organizing the speakers, and she's just done a really great job. And so the speakers that we have, when we think about the lineup, we're aware that you're paying money to be here. You're not coming here just for free. You're paying because we have to rent the venue, and there's food and lunch and all the things that go along with that. And so we want to make sure that there's value. You know, it's whatever it is, $150 to be here. A sandwich isn't $150, and air conditioning's not $150. So what we're really trying to make sure you get is really quality information, and I think that the lineup of people that we've put together today is representative of that. And so I'm the least valuable, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the wildlife industry, its origins, the financial components around it, do's and don'ts, things to watch out for, and even some new legal outcomes that might be relevant to you. Dr. Moorfeld is going to talk about wildlife reproductive. She is a wildlife reproductive physiologist and endocrinologist, and she's going to talk about some really smart stuff. The last time that she spoke at our education event, which was our first one, I decided she's the Elon Musk of the wildlife business. So when she comes up to talk, just make sure that you've had coffee and make sure your brain is sharp, because she's going to tell you some really, really smart stuff, I promise. And then we're going to have Joseph Richards. And Joseph is responsible. If you ever get in a helicopter or fly in a small plane over the hill country, you're going to see these little round plastic things everywhere. They're everywhere. He makes these things. He has the camera systems associated. And people think, well, I'll just buy one of those and catch my own animals, until they catch them and then they don't know what to do, because they have wild ass animals in this little box. And so Joseph is going to talk a little bit about do's and don'ts, how they work, what will work, what won't work. I haven't seen his presentation, but I know he's a highly credible, ethical, honorable guy, and I think that he can provide some real guidance if you want to be cavalier and catch your own animals. We're also going to have Daniel Richardson and Brent Markham from Higginbotham Insurance. And so this is really, really important. It's so important. As the value of these animals have skyrocketed over the last several years, we're walking around fully exposed that when the animal dies, we have no coverage. And so as a company, we've started buying insurance on a lot of the animals that we have, and we found that it is likely one of the most financially sensible decisions that we've made in our business. And so they're going to share a little bit about the products that they offer around wildlife, property insurance for your ranch, things that people are running into where they're having some challenges with getting insurance. And so they're here to assist with that as well. And then we're going to have lunch. And then Dr. Barker, who is our in-house vet, she is going to talk about capture stress and handling practices. Dr. Barker, we're probably going to end up giving her an aneurysm before it's all said and done with. I don't know how many miles. She's probably put more miles on a vehicle in the last couple years than she has her whole life. And she is all over Texas all the time in conjunction with the team that she's put together. And Dr. Robertson, I saw him here somewhere. I don't know where he's at. There he is in the back. And so she's going to give a great presentation. And then Franz, where are you at? I saw you. He's going to talk a lot about new drugs and the development of some new drugs that are available, and he's going to give us some insight into his company and what they're doing to develop some products and things like that. And then Andrew Joseph, where's Andrew? I haven't seen Andrew this morning. He's on his way? Oh, boy. Andrew is going to talk about predators this go round. Andrew actually works for us. He works on our ranches. He's a contractor. He doesn't work as an employee. He goes out and he catches predators. And if we say we can't catch that one, Andrew catches it. And he was trained by Daryl, and so he's highly skilled. He'll give you some great information. So with that being said, I'll jump into my presentation. But before I do, we're going to practice this. Does anyone have any questions? No one even wants to know where the bathroom's at. The bathrooms are right there, okay? So, and don't hesitate. There's water, coffee, snacks, whatever. Don't feel bad if you got to get up and come get a cup of coffee or drink or a snack or whatever while either I or someone else is giving a presentation. That's what they're here for, so feel free to get up if you need to do so. Okay, so I'm going to move forward, and obviously the title of my presentation is, wait, this is the wrong presentation. This is the presentation number 2. I'm making 2 presentations today. One of them is going to be about the wildlife industry, as I said, but another subject that we're going to talk about this afternoon is conservation easements and how those conservation easements are important to you and what financial benefits can you gain from being involved in them. Yeah, okay, so we have pamphlets that you all actually need these. They didn't hand these out yet. So this is a pamphlet that includes both of my presentations, but it also has a handout that you're going to need for your CPA. So these women will walk around and hand these out. So if you want one, put your hand up so they know to hand you one. Okay, that's the right one. Perfect, thank you. Okay, conservation, capitalism, and technology. So I've given this presentation several times. I've amended it a little bit as we've gone along. And so we're going to talk about investing in the exotic wildlife industry. And I guess I control this. Do I control this? Where do I point? It you? Okay, there we go. So I've already basically covered this part of the presentation. Again, this is essentially saying, why are we here? Well, we're here to learn, and we need to share the information that we're learning with other people. That's what this slide is about. So, next slide. All right, so this is one of the things that I found most fascinating. Katie, please make sure that I stay on time, because I get a little long-winded. Okay, so one of the things I found incredibly fascinating about this industry was the history of it. How in the world did all these animals get here? There's this belief that, you know, Bubba redneck oil guy from Houston is somehow importing all these animals from Africa to feed his ego, and that's just simply not the truth at all. So these animals originated from zoos. That's where they came from. And the history of that is not very, it's not openly shared. There's not a lot of information available about it because the zoos don't want anybody to know. They don't want anybody to know that they sent all these animals to Texas, and then this hunting industry was developed, and then all these other industries were developed, and they don't want anybody to know that. So it's this great big secret within the zoo community that not only have they been doing this, started in the 1920s, but it really started picking up as time went by, but they still do it today. Like right now, this month, there will be animals coming to the state of Texas from city zoos all over the United States, whether it's most notably San Diego Zoo. San Antonio Zoo doesn't do it too much anymore. It's probably pretty sparse because they don't have a huge host stock collection, but city zoos, nonprofit organizations, have been sending these animals here for a very, very, very long time. So imports, very few are done by private parties. In other words, very few are done by private parties. There were some imports that some private parties participated in back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. There was even a few of them in the 90s. A woman by the name of Holly Hunt with International Animal Exchange played a huge role in that. So there were some private party imports. Warthogs is one of the, I think, significant species that was done by a private party. Lord Derby eland, we don't see those walking around in Texas, but private party imported Lord Derby eland. They are still owned by that family, at least a majority interest of it is. And so breeding is the only path to grow. So if zoos are shipping us animals and we now have almost all of the animals, we can't really count on zoos to be the source of growing our industry because they're a minuscule little part of the overall industry. You can't import the animals at all anymore, so the only way forward is to breed. So this is a slide that my brother and I put together when we first started WildLife Partners. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing. You can read this, but the long and the short of it is this data was compiled from articles that are available on the internet. It's also compiled from records that exist within the zoo community that I've been able to gain access to. But the long and the short of it is that the King Ranch, it was actually in the 1920s, early 30s, they were able to acquire nilgai antelope. That's kind of the beginning of this process. But there wasn't a whole lot that happened between 1930 and 1963. There were some movements and some activity in the 50s, but it really wasn't very significant. In 1963, there is an article that exists. I have the article at the office, but it says that there are now 13 species of animals on Texas ranches. So we went from 0 in the 20s and 30s to 1. And then by 1963, there's now 13 different species. 1966, you have 25 species and 37,000 animals. And that's pretty significant. When you're starting from 0 and you're just simply getting zoo animals, these animals are clearly doing well once they reach Texas habitat and once they were turned out to live as free animals, if you will. So you can follow this growth chart, and what you're ultimately going to end up see is that if you look at 2010, you're going to see there's 125 species, 400,000 exotics on high fence ranches in Texas with 50 to 60,000 free-ranging animals. So you've gone from nothing in 1930, just a handful in 1963, and let's just call it almost 45 or 50 years later, you have 125 species and tens of thousands of animals roaming the state, most of which are behind high fence, but a lot are free ranging. This includes axis and blackbuck and aoudad and fallow and all the animals that are now free ranging, cycadeer, the higher end bongo kudu sable. You really don't see those free ranging, at least for very long. We actually lost one off a trailer here in Waring. We spotted it a couple of times and then some trapper nabbed it and they got it before we did. So the long and the short of it is you see this tremendous industry growth, and then in 2018, well, let me back up. In 2007, I'm going to back up. In 2007, the state of Texas was starting to get curious about what's going on. Like, there's this industry that's developed, what's happening, what is going on within our state, and they did an economic impact study, and what they determined at that time was that there were roughly 5,000 ranches that had exotics on them, both low fence and high fence. I don't remember the total acreage number, but it was millions of acres. And they determined that the industry at that time was $1.3 billion was the economic impact to our state, and that was in 2007. So for those of you that have been in this for a little while, and those of you that have been in it for a long while, you've seen that since 2007, there has been astronomical growth. It's tremendous growth that's occurred in the last 15 or 18 years. We've had some discussions with Texas A&M about updating this economic impact survey in order to get surveys and things like that related to populations and participation and revenues. And so don't be surprised in the future if you get a letter in the mail from Texas A&M and they're updating this economic impact survey or study. And if you get it, fill it out. Like it helps everybody if you do that. But the long and the short of it is, if you go to 2018, you're going to see that, speaking of super exotics, and this is a guess, it's a wild-ass guess, okay? It's because there's not really any significant science around it other than we know how many species that have been imported from zoos, and we can kind of calculate breeding populations as they move forward. But in 2018, excluding your commons like axis and blackbuck and things like that that are free-ranging, strictly speaking about super exotics, there were roughly 100,000 super exotics in the state of Texas in 2018. And why is that important? I'll get into a lot of detail around that in a few minutes, but the reason it's important is because we're actually not reinventing the wheel. or inventing the wheel. We're duplicating a process that already existed in South Africa. South Africa's already been down this road. They've already been through the process of decimation of wildlife as the result of farming and human encroachment, disease, and various other things. And they put in place legislation that solved the problem, and they had this astronomical growth in wildlife populations. It's by far the most successful wildlife conservation story that has ever been told, and Texas is on track to duplicate what they did. So this is the part that I love about the industry, apart from just raising animals and learning the historical knowledge. My background is in financial services, so I owned a broker-dealer, which is an investment firm. I was involved in the oil and gas industry, and so my life has been built around investments and tax strategy and return on capital and things like that. And while I got into the animal business because I really love animals, the truth is I got into this for tax purposes. That is why I started. In 2011 or 2012, somewhere around there, while in the oil business, I was looking for a tax strategy that would assist me with tax deductions. And my CPA at the time recommended one of two things. It was either a captive insurance company or it was livestock. And when he said livestock, he did not know that he meant kudu or zebra or any of that. He just said livestock. Well, I quickly learned that exotic wildlife is livestock, which we'll get into as we move through this. But I approached this initially as it was a tax strategy without a revenue model because I didn't know how I was going to generate any revenue, but it was also because I just love having fun. I mean, I'm a fun junkie. And when I bought all these animals, I took my kids, Spencer, who's here in the middle, my friends, and we went out and act like maniacs, and we just had a great time hunting axis deer and shooting pigs in the middle of the night and laughing and doing dumb stuff. And it was just like, we had so much fun. And then the day came where it's like, okay, well, you can't keep taking all these tax write-offs if you don't have revenue. And so I had to figure out, how do I turn this into an investment? And so for any of you that are using this as a tax strategy, I can assure you, your CPA is going to ask you, well, how do you justify this as a business? And I'm going to teach you that today if you don't already know. So this is kind of, let me switch slides here, sorry. I skipped a slide. I forgot to do that, sorry. So this is investing, and so exotics as an investment, what this is driven by is tax incentives, tax-favored income, and then, of course, fun and bragging rights. I'm sure there's nobody here that likes to brag to their friends that they have cool animals. Nobody, not even pet kangaroos or any of that. But it's really, it is definitely one of the driving factors behind why people do this. But the underlying reason that we're all here is while we love wildlife and we love conservation, and it all makes us feel good, we're not going to devote huge amounts of money to this unless it makes economic sense. Unless you guys are way more wealthy than I'm aware of. And so this has to make economic sense in order for it to be sustainable over time. So the next thing that you're going to look at is the handout that's in your book. So you're looking for the tax implications handout. And I'm not going to read this document to you. I'll tell you the reason I printed this out and gave this to you. What I have discovered is that 95% of CPAs out there, they don't know how to do this, and when you tell them that you're doing it, they don't want to do it. They don't understand it. They don't know the tax law around it. They're resistant to allow you to take the tax deductions that you are legally entitled to take. It is an uphill battle with CPAs, and if you don't know how to tell the story and you don't know how to communicate to them what the tax strategy is, they're just simply not going to let you do it. They're not going to take the risk of you getting audited and them not being able to answer the questions. So this handout is what you're going to give to your CPA. And if your CPA has questions, they can call us. We will be more than happy to walk through this or talk to them. But I can assure you, if you have a CPA that has even a minor amount of intelligence, this will answer all the questions that they have. And I'm gonna talk through it versus read it to you. So in the state of Texas, we have what is referred to as the Ag Code. And the Ag Code is a whole set of laws around agriculture, and they have definitions around certain things. There are two definitions that are relevant to us. One of them is livestock, and the other one is exotic livestock. And so if you look at this sheet, you can read it for yourself. The definitions are there. Where in the Ag Code that they exist is cited. It's got the section numbers and everything. And in the state of Texas, exotic wildlife, antelope, kudu, sable, blah, 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 go down, all the way down the list of all of them, they're classified as exotic livestock. And then under the definition of livestock, it includes exotic livestock. And so why is that important? Well, it's important because under the federal tax code, you are looking for depreciation or a tax write-off. And so does anybody here, well, I don't, this is probably the wrong, I already know the answer, but I'm gonna go ahead and make the point. So I would guess that the vast majority of the people in this room don't know what depreciation is, and they don't actually fully understand what a tax write-off is. Just by a show of hands, would anybody here say that's somewhat of an accurate statement? Yes? Okay, well, a lot of you are probably more well-versed than I realize. So I'm gonna give you the short version of the story. If you're in a business and you go out and buy a tractor or a truck, like you hear about businesses at the end of the year buying trucks and tractors and things like that, right? Well, the reason they're doing that is because they get to reduce their taxable income as the result of buying that equipment. And historically, the way the depreciation works is they say if you buy, let's say, a truck, well, the IRS says that truck is going to depreciate over time. It's not going to be worth anything in a few years. So the time frame that they've established for a truck, and various business equipment have different time frames, but a truck was about 5 years. I think 5 years was the number. So what that means, if you spend 100 grand on a truck, which is what trucks cost nowadays, you get to reduce your taxable income by $20,000 a year over a period of 5 years. So what that means is you spend 100 grand if you pay cash, so you give away 100 grand, you get to depreciate $20,000, but you owe tax on the other 80 grand, but you don't have the money anymore because you bought the truck. And so Congress in 2017 created this wonderful, wonderful new law. It's called the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. Trump put it in place. And what this did is they said, we're gonna get rid of the timeline. We're gonna allow you to write all of that off in the first year. So when I first started doing this, we were only able to take 50% deduction in the first year. And then when the Tax Cut and Jobs Act happened, it became 100%. So what that means is that if I buy a tractor and I've spent $100,000 on the tractor, I get to write off $100,000 that year. So if I'm in the top tax bracket, that means I save $37,500 on my tax bill that year. But I still have a tractor that's worth 100 grand. So I've reduced my tax liability as the result of that, okay? I know that's probably complicated in some ways for some people. If you have questions, don't hesitate to grab me afterwards and I'll give you more detail. But the reason all this is important is that we're talking about trucks and tractors, right? Well, a kudu is the same as a truck and a tractor. So livestock is considered under the tax code, and it is listed here where that's at, section 179, that livestock is business equipment. So when you buy livestock, it's the same as buying a printing press, an x-ray machine, a truck, a tractor, a backhoe, a Kubota. It's the same. It's the same from a tax standpoint. So what that means is that every time that you buy one of these animals, you qualify for a tax write-off against your income. But you have to have a business around doing it. You can't buy just males and say that I'm just buying males, because that's inventory. That's not a business asset. That's inventory. It's a little different. So this tax sheet is everything that your CPA needs to know in order to be able to understand what you're doing from a financial standpoint for tax purposes. It's going to show you that in addition to the animals, and this is one of the beautiful parts about what we do, is that what we're doing is we are taking what is now a vacation home, or maybe was a vacation home. So if you have a ranch, right? You go there and you hang out and there's a river and you swim or a pool and you goof off and you ride four-wheelers and you hunt deer. That's a vacation property. It's not a business, it's just a vacation property. And as a result of that, nothing you do there is tax deductible. You have to pay for all of the things you do there with after-tax money. So nothing is deductible. It gives you no tax incentive. But what we're gonna do as the result of having a breeding business is that we're gonna convert that property from a vacation property into a business. This is now a business. It's a business operation. And what is it? It is a breeding business. That's what we do. We breed exotic wildlife, which is livestock. This is not a gray area. This is not a loophole. This is not a magic trick. It's not something sneaky and evasive. This is really, really, really simple. If I want to breed Wagyu beef, it's the exact same business operation. It's the same thing. I'm breeding animals, which are livestock, which is a part of the tax code that is accepted as being totally legitimate. There's a reason that livestock are designated as business equipment in the tax code. Ooh. Okay, so we're utilizing depreciation under Section 179. Animals are business equipment, which makes all the other operating cost investments deductible. So what that means is, if you're raising exotic wildlife on your property, right, and you decide, you know what, I need a barn, and you're gonna build a barn. Well, previously your barn is not deductible. That's just an improvement that you're making to your ranch. But now, because you're in the breeding business, your barn is tax deductible. So you're making an improvement to your property, but you're getting to do it with after-tax money. So what that means is the value of your real estate is going up, but you're getting to do it with a tax deduction. You're not having to pay the full value of that barn because of the tax deductions that you're getting against other income. If you don't have other income, this is irrelevant, but if you have other income from a job or a business or something else, it's highly advantageous. So the animals can appreciate in value. So in case you didn't know, animals have gone up in value a lot over the last 10 years. So while you go out, I'll give you an example. If I buy Apple stock, right? When I buy Apple stock, I get no tax write-off. I have to buy Apple stock with after-tax money. So if I wanted to buy $100 worth of Apple stock, I had to make about $125 or $130 to get the $100. So I'm investing after-tax money, and then what I'm doing is I'm hoping that it's going to appreciate in value. Animals do the same thing. The difference is the $100 that I spend on the animal, I get to write that off. As the result, my cost basis in it is $62.50. So instead of $125 that turned into $100, I'm dealing with $100 that turns into $62.50. So my cost basis is significantly less because the IRS is essentially subsidizing what I'm doing because I'm getting to write this off as business equipment. So I'm looking for the same appreciation and value on an animal that I'm looking for out of Apple stock. The difference is it doesn't cost me as much money to invest in the animal as it does to invest in the Apple stock because of the tax incentives. So, yes. So this year it's actually 60%, and thank you for the question. So the Tax Cut and Job Act has a provision that is sunsetting. So last year it was 80%, which it's a little greater than 80% because the 20% remaining, you're getting 20% of that. So it's about 85%. This year it's 68%. There was a law that was passed through the House earlier this year. So it was actually a bill sponsored by the Democrats, and everyone recognizes that this sunset provision that's gonna go 80, 60, 40, 20 is going to be devastating for the economy because it's gonna just crush business reinvestment. And so the Democrats put a bill through the House. It was tied to the child tax credit. And what they were doing is they were gonna take depreciation back to 100% through 2026. With overwhelming support, it passed the House of Representatives, it got to the Senate. The Republicans killed the bill, and they killed the bill because they do not want to give Biden a win before the election. And so they're banking on the fact that they're gonna win the election and put out a better tax bill. My understanding is their intent is to make these permanent. There was some arguing around the child tax credit as to that was the real reason that they were doing it, but the Democrats gave up on those provisions in the tax credit, and they said, we'll wipe that out, just give us the depreciation. So I don't know what your political affiliations are, but I'll vote for Donald Trump. And so if you don't, that's okay. But for me, I lean right. And so when Democrats are putting out a tax bill that is favorable to business and they're revamping depreciation that was a Trump policy, that gives me a lot of reassurance that this is going to occur, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican that gets elected. So I do believe that in 2025, that there will be, this year, they were trying to get this bill passed before tax day, April 15th, to avoid people from filing in 2023 and having to refile. It didn't happen. And so I do believe that this will pass before April 15th of next year in the new Congress. And I do believe that it'll go back to 100% retroactively to 24. I don't think they'll be able to do it for 23 because everybody would have to refile. But the answer to your question is this year it's 68%, and then you're going to get the balance of that, the 32%, over the next 4 years. So you still get it's still greater than when I started at 50%, but it's 68% this year. That's correct. But I truly do not believe that that will ever happen. That is the law today, but I don't believe that that will be the outcome. Okay, thank you for the question. So the other thing about animals is that they multiply. So if I buy a sable and I have a female, and I buy a healthy female and she breeds, she's gonna have a baby. Well, Apple stock doesn't do that. It might split, but if it splits, the market cap of the company doesn't double just because the stock splits. The market cap stays essentially the same unless you get more appreciation. But in the animal business, not only are you buying an asset that gives you tax deductions, but that animal actually has a baby, which means that you've now increased your value without the mother having to have appreciated it all. So even if you got no appreciation on the value of the animal and you have a baby, you're still in the positive. And so the last thing is that the animals are tax favored. They're capital gains versus ordinary income. So, yes, sir.
So, I know with rangeland, you want to show a profit.
Yes, sir.
After a certain period of time.
Yes, sir.
Is this the same thing, or do you just need to show income?
So technically, you don't have to show income. You don't have to show a profit, and I'll explain why. So people have this notion that you have to show the IRS that you made money. If that were the case, Amazon would have been crushed long time ago before they became the Amazon of today. They lost money for 20 some odd years. So you don't actually have to show a profit. What you have to show is you have to show a business motive, a profit motive, and it can't be a hobby. So in other words, that's what you're trying to avoid being deemed as a hobby. So the solution to that is really simple. It's record keeping. So when you're buying all of these assets and you're getting started, you keep records of everything you're buying. You record who you bought it from, how much you paid for it. You keep copious records of what you're doing. But the other thing that you're going to do is you're going to record all of your offspring. So if you're just doing this on an Excel spreadsheet, it's fine. But by recording your offspring, what you can demonstrate is that the asset value of what you've invested in has increased. And the IRS cannot force you to sell your assets in order to make you pay tax. They can't do that. So the key to, and Joe, if you'll raise your hand, Joe is with WildLife Ranch Solutions. So the key to not having problems with the IRS is to, number one, obey the law and live into the tax code. But number two, it's be prepared. You know, if the IRS shows up and you have no records and you haven't kept anything and you've just paid in cash, you're probably going to have problems. But if you're keeping records of what you're doing and you're tracking your offspring and you're tracking your death loss and you're tracking your feed expenses and you're tracking your employees and you're tracking the feed bin that you bought and the fuel that you're using, if you're keeping track of all this stuff, you should not have any issues even if you don't sell anything.
Does it help to have some income?
A CPA would tell you that the answer to that is yes. But legally speaking, the IRS cannot force you to sell the asset that you own that's appreciating. The example I'll give you is this. If I go and I buy stock and that stock goes up in value, the IRS cannot force me to sell that stock in order to pay tax. And with assets that I own in real estate, if you go buy, let's say you own a real estate company and you're generating tax losses through real estate, through operations, while you may have rental income, you're losing money. The IRS cannot force you to sell your real estate properties in order to make you pay tax. So if you're recording the value of your asset base and you're demonstrating that it's going up in value, and the IRS shows up to audit you, if you're prepared with your records and you say, look, I don't want to sell these, and the reason I don't want is I'm growing my herd. If I have to go out and buy them, that means I've got to spend $50,000 or $60,000 a head to buy them, but if I breed them, and then I start getting compounding breeding because the females that I'm keeping are now having babies, I'm growing my herd faster by doing it that way than what I can afford to do in the other way. And so you do not have to have revenue in order to substantiate this. You just have to avoid it being classified as a hobby. And if you have a business plan and you follow the business plan and you have records, it's not difficult to avoid that classification. I wouldn't say that the lack of revenue increases your chance of audit. No, the IRS audit strategies are not really built around that. I wouldn't say that's the case. I mean, there are certain deductions that you can take that do red flag you, like a home office or things like that. But I wouldn't say that your income is probably your single greatest audit risk. The more money you make, the more likely you are to get audited. And with the new budgets the IRS has put out, that is who they're going after. So I personally, I have not personally been audited. And I've been doing this for more than 10 years, and I've taken millions of dollars of deductions. I have personally not paid income tax since 2011. And so this tax strategy works. I have not been audited. I follow the letter of the law. I don't get into gray areas. I stay right along the line of where you're supposed to be. I have great tax counsel that we work with. So the answer to your question is you don't have to have income. I do have income through some of the entities that we use, but one of the entities I use, I've taken several $million of depreciation. It's never made money, but it owns assets and animals. And so I hope that answers your question. Yeah, so the long and the short of it is that this is a tax strategy. These are the bullet points of the tax strategy. I'm going to kind of burn through this because so we're going to talk about deploying capital. The short version of this is you're taking money and you're putting it into an asset, right? So how many of you have a retirement plan? Lots of you, right? Do you think about where you're going to allocate the money in your retirement plan, or do you just throw a dart at the dartboard? Or do you base it on how you feel that day? Or do you do it based on what your neighbor says? The answer is, hopefully you do some homework. But we don't do that in the animal business. We get these knee-jerk reactions because some guy calls us on the phone or texts us some pictures and we get excited and we think, oh, that's cool, and we buy it. And the next thing we know, it's dead. We didn't do any homework. We didn't figure out whether it was the right animal for us. We didn't figure out whether we live in an area of the state that's accommodating to that animal. It's like we have these brain farts because we get excited about owning a zebra. And so you have to think about what you're doing as capital allocation. You are taking your hard-earned money and you are putting it into an asset. And there's a strategy behind what you're doing, hopefully. And if you can avoid impulse buying, it's going to help you tremendously. So now we're going to talk about buying animals, right? So we've all bought animals, hopefully. Maybe you've had good luck, maybe you've had bad luck. My experience has all been generally very positive. So you can buy animals at auctions. You can buy them at breeder auctions or consignment auctions. Breeder auctions are like us. We have a breeder auction twice a year where the only animals that we sell as a general rule are our animals. We don't sell anybody else's animals with very rare exceptions. And so when you're buying from a breeder, you know who you're getting them from. There's no middleman in the middle. Most of the animals, the seller has a pretty intimate knowledge of what they are. Some of our staff is here. They take care of these animals. We can give you a lot of data about the animal you're buying. You generally get a warranty. These generally occur in person or online. You can participate either way. There's a large variety of species. It can be a source of entertainment. And the downside is it's mo money, It's more expensive. If you're going to buy from a breeder and you're going to get all the disclosure and you're going to get all the information and you're going to get the support and all the help, you're going to pay more money. So if you're a bargain hunter, this is not the place to go. If you're wanting to get the best of the best, this is the place to go. We're not the only game in town. There's other breeders that have auctions. They are very successful. They do a great job. You can get great animals from some of these other breeders as well. So consignment auctions, some of these are online. Some of these are, as an example, the EWA does auctions twice a year. Those are all consignment animals. So these are animals that are being thrown into a pool. There's a whole lot of different sellers selling animals. The benefits are you get to buy these immediately. They occur online constantly. There's WildLife Buyer. We have exoticauction.com. You can buy these animals on the daily basis. Every day there's stuff available. There's a variety of species, and you can get some bargains. But you can also get some other things that come with it. And so while there's lower price, there's higher risk. And that's true not just for our auction, but it's true for all of these auctions. When you're dealing with consignment auctions, you don't necessarily know. The YO is a great example. You don't know who the seller is in a lot of cases. They're anonymous. They hide behind a name. And so there's risk that comes with that. So the cons are there's no guarantee, limited information. The animal has passed through at least 2 hands before it gets to you. Limited disclosure about the animal, and there is high mortality compared to other buying opportunities. So there's no reason to not do these if you're comfortable with the risk, but you have to walk into it with your eyes wide open, understanding that when you're bargain hunting, you're probably going to end up with some losses. It's just the way it is. And the moral of the story is whether you're buying from the breeder or whether you're buying from the consignment auction, the price is probably going to level out to pretty close to the same. And it's because when you're buying the bargain, you have some losses, which increases your cost per head on the ones that live. So it ends up being relatively close to the same. It's just there's a little different emotion involved. Brokers and retail. So this is Jared Steinbach. He's preaching to the choir. And Jared's not here today, I don't think. But when you're buying from a broker, there's a lot of benefits. There's some downside. It really just comes down to relationship. You want to make sure you know who you're buying from. One of the gauges that I've used when I've worked with brokers in the past is ask yourself a question. How much does this person have invested in their business? Like, how much do they have? Do they have a truck and a trailer and a dart gun? Or do they have a property where they have some animals? They take care of animals. They keep track of animals. Do they pay a vet to assist them? How much investment are they making into this operation? The lower the investment that they have made into their business, I have found that those are the areas that I want to avoid. And the reason I want to avoid is because people that are in a pinch to make money cut corners. They make decisions that are not always the best, and you don't always get a better price. And so you're going to deal with people that are making decisions based on financial needs because they're in a jam versus trying to do what is the best practice for you and what is the best practice for the animal. So some of them offer a guarantee. There's lots to choose from. If you don't know any brokers and you want to go through the whirlwind of dealing with them, go on Facebook and put a post up and say, I'm looking to buy, and list 10 different species and put your phone number. Or do that to like your worst enemy. So one of the things about this is you do get a personal relationship with the person if they do good business. They do come with some education and some consulting. Delivery is often included, and some of them do offer full disclosure. But again, not all brokers are credible. Not all of them even can give a guarantee, and not all brokers are willing to provide animal information. So they don't want you to know where they got it. So they deliberately hide that information from you, which it's critically important. If you're buying, let's just say as an example, let's say you're buying a bongo, and the person that owned those bongo didn't have them in a pen. They lived in 1,000 acres. And you buy that bongo and you think, oh, I'm going to put this bongo in 1 acre by my house near my dogs. That's probably not going to work out very well for you. But they don't tell you that. They don't tell you this animal is wild as can be and don't put it in that 1 acre pen because it's going to die from stress. They don't tell you that. And so these are really important pieces of information that you need to understand. I'll go through this pretty quick. The difference between retail and wholesale. Retail means Somebody else is making money for putting the transaction together. They're supposed to give you some benefits in doing so. They caught the animal, they're bringing you the animal, they're giving you some service, they're giving you some help, they're making it convenient for you. Wholesale is get in your truck, wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, drive across Texas, hop in a helicopter, get a dart gun, catch the animal, put it in a trailer, drive back to wherever your ranch is, unload it, and you're gonna get to buy that animal cheaper. It's generally somewhere around 70% of the cost of retail, give or take. So there is a difference between wholesale and retail. You have to decide where you want to be. Do you want to be the person out doing the rodeo, or do you want to be the person that opens the gate with your camera and you let the animal out? And knowing which one of those roles that you want to be in is going to dictate what you're spending. I must have confused you. Did I say something confuse you? Yes. Okay, that's okay. I saw it on your face. So when I say if you want to be the person that's letting the animal out, in other words, a broker shows up at your ranch with their trailer, you're there with your wife and kids, and you've got your little video camera, and you all are celebrating the arrival of the new animal, and you're videoing it so you can show it to all your friends and family. That's a retail purchase. Okay, does that clarify what I was saying? Okay, great. And so you have to decide what side of the market you want to be on. The same thing is true when you're generating income, when you're selling. Do you want to be the person catching those animals on your property, or do you want somebody else to do that? So if you're going to have someone else do it, that means you're not going to get retail. All these prices that you see at auctions where animals sell for X amount, you're not going to get that price. You don't get to put that in your pocket unless you're willing to get a hole in your leg, because that's what happens when you catch animals. You're going to get hurt. You're going to get kicked. Where's Travis? Travis, he's got a scar on his arm. Broke his arm here just a few weeks ago. I took a fallow brow tine to the thigh. There's not an animal guy in this room that has not been hurt, I promise you. And so if you want to get hurt, you get to make that extra money. But if you don't want to do that, you have to be willing to take less than the price that you're seeing at these online auctions or the auctions that you see at the EWA or with us, because somebody else has to do the dirty work. And so keep that in mind when you're dealing with people. When you're selling animals, don't get your feelings hurt because they offer you less than what you saw at the auction. If you don't want to sell it for that, you don't have to sell it for that, but you have to go catch it. And it is fun, but it is painful. So you just have to make the decision for yourself where you want to be on this. Okay, places to buy. This is the purchase summary. These are just basic questions. And am I getting enough information? Is there warranty? Will I get any assistance? And how badly do I want it? And this is the most important part. Is it priced to match the risk that I'm taking? If I'm buying it from an online auction and there's almost no information whatsoever, like, is the price of the animal reflective of that? If I'm not getting a warranty, is it reflective of that? If I am getting a warranty, is it reflective of that? And so you really have to think about these things when you're buying and not be impulsive, and ask yourself the question, is it worth the risk? And I'll tell you the answer to the question. It all levels out. If you're spending more money, you end up with less mortality. If you're spending less money, you end up with higher mortality, which means more cost. It all levels out. It comes out to be about the same. And so it's just a matter of heartache, whether you want to deal with the heartache along the way on the hopes that maybe on a short term you're going to get the win. And you can do that. There's nothing wrong with doing it that way. So again, this is selling. I'm not going to go into great detail on this. It's everything I just said to you. You have to decide whether or not you want to be the person catching and moving the animals, or whether you want someone to assist you with doing that. You're not going to get the same money on either of these ends. And you just have to make a decision about where you want to be. My recommendation to you is, if you don't know how to catch animals and you want to learn, don't just go out there with the dart gun. Hire somebody to come in and help you. We will come do that. We will be happy to be a part of showing you how to catch animals. You're going to have to allow us to buy the animals at wholesale, but if you get a little better at it as time goes by, Tad back here is, you got your hand up, Tad? So Tad is one of our lead catch guys. He runs our external catch crew. Tad helps people. He teaches them how to do things. He shows them what to do and what not to do. And it doesn't matter if they end up doing it on their own. We don't lose out because of that. We build a great relationship. The industry is better all around. So if you want to do that, embrace it, but just get some help as you're doing it. If you don't want to do it, hire Tad. Tad's a great guy. He's handsome too. Again, this is you selling directly to a landowner. You're going to get paid retail. This is wholesale. So if you're letting brokers buy your animals and you're selling to a broker, you're only going to get wholesale. And then this is the auction story where you're selling at auctions. In some cases, you may get more money if you sell an animal through a consignment auction. You are going to still have to pay the 10% fee, the boarding fee, the transport fee, all the stuff along with it. Then you have to hire the vet to go catch the animal unless you want to catch it yourself. It all levels out. I promise you, it all levels out. So it's fun doing these things, but at the end of the day, it comes out to being pretty close to the same. You may think you're getting a better deal by doing it this way, but it all levels out. When you start killing animals and you have to eat it because you're the one catching them, you start to realize very quickly, you know what, that guy was really smart, you know? He actually, he came here and didn't kill anything, or he did kill something and you didn't have to eat it, he paid for it. So you just kind of have to evaluate where in the marketplace do you want to be. This is just a summary of everything we just said, and you all have these printouts so you can read this in more detail, but it's just, the point I'm trying to make in all of this is just use your brain. Like, use your brain as it relates to doing this. You know, you may have a few $100,000 in a retirement account, or maybe you have a few $1 million in a retirement account. In the blink of an eye, you can have millions of dollars of animals. It happens really fast. If you buy foundation animals that are high quality animals and they have babies and they reproduce, in a matter of 3 or 4 years, you can have millions of dollars of animals on your property. So treat it that way. Treat it like you're managing millions of dollars of assets. Don't throw a dart at the dartboard and hoping for the best. Don't allow some wild idiot that has no insurance coverage or doesn't have any backing or doesn't have any ability to stand by what he's doing to come in and manage your assets. You would never allow an idiot to manage your investment portfolio. So why would you allow an idiot to manage your animal herd? It just doesn't make any sense to do that. But out of convenience or out of a lack of relationships, or just simply because we're trying to maintain control, maybe we lower our threshold of expectation. It is going to cost you in the end if you do that. Okay, I'm going to talk about this because I think it's really important. This just happened. It is applicable to our company, and I think it's really, really important for everybody to think about whether you're a buyer or whether you're a seller. We purchased 4 kudu. I'm not going to use any names, but we purchased 4 kudu. It was $144,000. It was 2 years ago. When they showed up to deliver the animals, the kudu were dead. There were 2 dead kudu on the trailer. They only delivered 2 the first time, so they were both dead. So they decided, okay, well, we're going to take those back and we'll bring you 4 more. So on the next trip, they brought 4 kudu. I'm buying these kudu at retail, right? They're catching them, they're delivering them. One of the kudu on the trailer is dead. One of the kudu is suffering from capture myopathy and doesn't want to get up, and the other 2 kudu look fine. So we do what anybody would do. We say, well, we're not taking the one that's dead, obviously, and the one that doesn't want to get up, you have to take that back. We don't want it. And they say, well, we'll stand by it if you just let it off the trailer. Like, if something happens and it dies, we'll warranty it, right? Well, it went over, lay down under a tree, just like animals with capture myopathy do, and it died within 48 hours. So then the seller did not want to give us our money back, and they didn't want to replace the kudu. They offered to give us money for 1 kudu, which was the dead kudu, but they were not going to give us the money for the kudu that was released off the trailer. This particular seller is extremely wealthy, and I just said, you know what, I'm going to fight this fight. We're going to fight this fight to identify what is actually the law when it comes to people selling animals in Texas. What is the law? Because I would assume if you own animals and you're in this room, you bought animals from somebody and they died shortly after you bought them, and they offer you what is referred to as a tail light warranty, meaning that when the tail lights are in your eyes as they're driving out, that's your warranty, okay? And that's, I had a broker tell me that one time. No, you got a tail light warranty, Gilroy. Okay, I guess I did. And so I saved that text, by the way. So I decided I'm gonna prove a point here, okay? So this was a $36,000 dispute. 36 grand. He was willing to give us money back for 1. It was $36,000. I'm the biggest idiot on the planet for doing this. We spent $250,000 on legal fees to prove a point. And we went to trial. And we went in front of a jury of 12 people. And what a jury of 12 people decided is they said, even though we didn't have a written contract, that we had a contract. Verbal was a substantial enough contract. They also said that it was unconscionable to think that we would pay $36,000 for unhealthy animals. So we had the right to believe that what we were purchasing were healthy animals. And as the result of not receiving healthy animals, the seller had breached the agreement. And because they didn't give us our money back, the seller had committed theft. And because they had done all these things acting in malice, in other words, they were being deliberate in their efforts, they were penalized. And so on a $36,000 transaction, they were hit with a $594,000 judgment. And the point that I'm trying to make in bringing this up is that when someone sells you an animal, they have to stand behind it according to the law. It is the law. They have to stand behind it. It's not a matter of, oh, Brian Gilroy gives a warranty or WildLife Partners gives a warranty. The state of Texas says that if they're selling you an animal, you have the right to believe it's healthy unless they've told you otherwise. If they tell you the animal's got one eye or a broke leg or it's got pneumonia or whatever, okay, well, you're eating that. But if they don't tell you that, you have the right to believe that it is healthy. And if that animal is not healthy, you have the right to hold them accountable. That was a jury of 12 people that made that decision unanimously. And so I bring this up because I have been pushing for the last 10 years to force this industry to stand behind what they sell. Not just us, but everybody. Well, why? Because it will reflect the true value of animals. When there's someone out there selling animals and they don't take death loss when they're catching them off your property, well, they're not having to incorporate that loss into the price of the animals they're selling. They're able to sell those animals for significantly less money because they don't have to eat the death loss. And when they sell an animal and they don't warranty it, well, they don't have to take that loss either. And so there's this massive differentiation in the market that exists that doesn't reflect the true value of the animals because it's not factoring in all the animals that die. And so when people have to stand behind what they sell, the result is going to be they're going to slow down, they're going to make better decisions, they're going to treat the animals better, they're going to treat their customers better, and ultimately all of us are going to benefit from doing that. So I would encourage you that when you're dealing with people that are selling you animals, ask them very clearly, are you selling me a healthy animal? Is this a healthy animal that I'm buying, or are you selling me something that's not healthy? Because if it's healthy and you sell it to me and it dies in 24 or 48 hours, not because it hit the fence, but because it's sick, and I get a necropsy to support that, you're going to have to do something about it. And if they're not willing to do that, you have to make a decision as to whether you want to buy that animal or not. So my suggestion is turn the animal back if it doesn't look healthy. Don't let them unload it. Don't take the risk. It's not worth it. This is just talking about animal values. We have seen in recent past here in the last year or so, as depreciation has declined, as interest rates have climbed, we have seen somewhat of a lull in the market with certain species. Some species are still charging and going great and doing really great. Sable and kudu and Grevy zebras and black wildebeest and Inyala damas, these have all been pretty stable animals. There have been other species like Grant's gazelles and Thompson's gazelles where we've seen pretty significant drops in price on those species. As the market as a whole goes, I think that we've seen a lot of stability, but there are some things that are up and there are some things that are down. I can't tell you why that's the case. I can't tell you whether it's because of drought or whether it's because of inflation or whether it's interest rates or some people would say because it's an election year. I don't know the answer to that question. All I know is there are some great values out there. Grant's gazelles, Thompson's gazelles, Dama gazelles. There are some Inyalas that you can buy at great discounts right now. So if you're looking to acquire animals, there's some great opportunity to acquire animals below what they were a year ago. And so from my perspective, it's a great time to be buying animals. We went through this astronomical increase in price over a period of, let's just say 7 or 8 years. It was unsustainable. We could not keep climbing at the rates that we were climbing. There had to be something to slow it down or something to create a lull. And I think that it's very positive that we've seen this because when everything's going up by 20 or 30% a year, it creates a little intimidation in the market. You're not sure whether you should sell everything you have or whether you should go buy, because is it going to keep going? And so when you have market stability, which they call a floor, it makes everything within the industry a bit stronger, because you have an idea of where things level out. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. How long it's going to last, I don't know. All I know is I think there's tremendous opportunity. And when you factor in the tax incentives, it doesn't really matter. Even if you have a little decline in value, as long as you're keeping the animals alive and you're producing offspring and you're taking advantage of depreciation, it is still very easy to win, economically speaking. Very quickly, this chart is assuming you're buying 1 male and 5 females at retail, and then you're selling the offspring at wholesale. So this reflects that you're getting 1 offspring per year at an 80% production rate. You get 2 males and 2 female offspring. This is just using the law of averages. So if you look at the total offspring year at 80% rate, it says 2 and 2. That's 1 male and 1 female. So you're going to get $7,000 for the wholesale male, $60,000 for the wholesale female. So that's $134,000 of annual cash flow that you got off spending $410,000 that you get to depreciate and write off. So a 33% cash flow off any investment is astronomically good. It's excellent. Like, you can't get real estate that does that. Now, you have some feed cost and you have some land cost and things like that to incorporate into this, but this is just a basic example that you can use that will give you some perspective in terms of what kind of cash flow can I generate out of this if I'm selling my animals. And again, this is going back to the case study that was done with respect to South Africa. South Africa in 1991, their wildlife populations had been decimated. The estimated number of animals that remained was about 100,000 animals, and they enacted what is called the Game Theft Act. And the Game Theft Act basically privatized ownership of wildlife, privatized ownership of game. As the result of that law, between 1991 and 2018, there was $14.5 billion invested into wildlife breeding in South Africa. 50 million acres of marginal farmland that previously was growing soybeans and crops and things like that was converted into game farms. And so what happened is they took what had been decimated as the result of farming and human encroachment, and they turned it back into natural habitat. And the result of that is that in 2014, I believe it was, there was $300 million worth of animals sold at auction that year. And then in 2016 is when I met Norman Adamy. He came here to talk about the wildlife business, which was right before we started WildLife Partners. And then in 2018, it was estimated there was somewhere between 28 million is the high number. It was somewhere between 22 and 28 million animals. So they went from 100,000 animals to more than 20 million animals between 1991 and 2018. So for native wildlife enthusiasts, for people that are white-tailed deer only, bighorn sheep only, coyotes and bobcats only, don't kill the mountain lions, yada, 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 yada. That's a great, great thought. Truly, it's great. We have hundreds of thousands of exotic wildlife in Texas. Do the math. 25 years from today, if things continue going as they are now, there will be more than 20 million of these animals in this state. And if you think about all of the industry that is going to get created around that, your kids, your grandkids, people that you know, there's astronomical opportunity for jobs. You know, if you talk at Joseph, I don't know what Joseph's background is, but I know he built a business making capture equipment. Built a business doing that. There are people making drugs. There are people making all sorts of different things related to this. Feed companies, fence companies. There's all sorts of different stuff that's coming out of this. And so as you're thinking about what you're doing on your ranch, think about what you can tell young kids. Think about what you can tell kids that are going to school about a career. Like, there's so many different things you can do in the wildlife business because we have this unbelievable future in front of us because the animals are here. They're not going anywhere. Whether it rains, sleets, snows, hails, whether Trump gets elected or Biden gets elected, they're going to keep doing their thing in Mother Nature. They're going to keep getting on top of each other and making babies. And as the result of that, you don't have to play them music. You don't have to give them roses. You don't have to do any of that. Like, they just do it. And so it is inevitable. It is inevitable that this is going to happen. If someone tells you it's not going to, they don't know what they're talking about. It is going to occur. And so industry is going to develop around this, which is the same thing that happened in South Africa. Massive industry was developed in South Africa as the result of this. Huge industry got developed around the breeding industry. And so why is 2018 important? The single most common question that I get from people that are looking at this as an investment is, where is the saturation point? Where does that happen? Where do we reach the point where there's more animals than there are buyers? And the answer is, that's really not ever happened in South Africa. But what did happen is that there were more animals than the buyers were willing to pay those higher prices. And so what you saw in 2018 is you saw a collapse in the market in South Africa. It happened. 2018, it happened. So the people that bought for the first time in 2017, they got their asses handed to them. But the people that bought in 2014 and 2013 and 2012 and 2000 and 1999, they made astronomical amounts of money. There was a buffalo at one time that sold for 11 million US dollars for one bull. It was not uncommon to see buffalo selling for $1 million, sable for $1 million. It was unbelievable what this marketplace did. And we are on track to duplicate what they did. And we will reach a saturation point. We will. It will happen. We're probably somewhere, if I'm just going to take a wild ass guess, we're probably somewhere around 1995 from a population standpoint. But the difference is that here we get tax incentives and there they did not. Their tax, yes, Brent.
So you talk about Texas.
Yes, sir.
Just how you plan on this information exactly?
Could you speak up just a little bit?
You probably don't know this information exact, but just giving us some type of idea. Let's see here. Most of the wildlife exotic is done in Texas. That's where the market share is. How much of it would you say percentage is done outside of Texas?
It's very small. It's mainly focused in southern states. If you look at Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, there's a little bit in Arkansas. There's probably more in Florida than any of those other states. I'm going to take just a wild guess, Brent, and I would say that it's less than 5%. It's a very, very small number. It's mainly central. It's really built around zoos. So you have lots of private zoos. There's like 3,300 or 3,500 zoos in America, and only 230 or 240 of them are AZA zoos. So you have all these private zoos that are all over the place, and they're the ones that are holding most of the hoof stock that's outside of Texas. There's very few private ranches that are doing this. There are a handful in Florida. I only know of a few of them in Mississippi, and they really don't have many supers. It's mainly commons. There's a handful in North Carolina. There's some in Louisiana. There's actually a guy in Louisiana that has about 100 bongo. But it's not a big number. It's a very, very small number. So it doesn't really have the ability to affect our market in a material way. But what I do know is that it is possible to build those markets. Those markets can be built. If we reach a saturation point in Texas, it is possible to duplicate this in Florida. It's possible to duplicate this. Louisiana is a little more difficult because their laws are a little more difficult. But it certainly can be done in Georgia and Arkansas. New Mexico, there's probably some species that would do very well there. There already are. But it's very, very limited. We don't make any effort to focus on doing business out of state. We do some, but it's very limited. It's just not worth the headache. I've got to go all the way across the country to do business when I can do the same thing here. We buy more out of state than we sell. So it's a very small number. So again, what I'm trying to tell you is that, yes. I'm having a difficult time hearing you. Could you speak up? Yeah, so that's a great question, and it's a question that we get quite frequently related to emus and ostriches. The difference is that when you're looking at the emu and the ostrich market, this was a theory based on consumption. People believed that our society was going to eat these emu and the ostrich. They believed that the feathers would be worthwhile and that the oil would be worthwhile. And so there was this huge investment in emus and ostrich all over the country, really here and primarily, but it was all over the place. And what they discovered is people don't want to eat them. So there's no consumption. So if you don't have anybody to consume your product, what do you do with it? And the answer is they let them go. They just opened the gate and kicked them out because they were no longer economic. And so the correlation between emus and ostrich, the primary difference is the consumption market. When you look at consumption in the exotic wildlife industry, you have several forms of consumption. You probably wouldn't guess what the largest consumers are. Most people would think that hunting is the biggest consumer. Hunting does consume a lot of animals. It's not the biggest consumer. Mortality and transport, and mortality due to not taking care of the animals properly, and natural death due to parasite because of poor management practices, I would tell you that that mortality, that consumption is significantly greater statewide than consumption around hunting. And so we do have consumption, but the primary driver between our market and let's just say the emu and the ostrich market is that the people that are really driving demand in what we're doing are wealthy business owners that own ranches that are looking for tax savings. Someone that makes, let's say, $5 million a year, and they make that every year. And when they discover that they can buy animals and they can reduce that tax liability, and they beautify their ranch, and they get other ancillary tax incentives along with that, they do it again the next year. And then they do it again the year after that, and then they do it again the year after that, and then they buy another ranch and they do it again on the other ranch. And so trying to get these people to do what we were talking about, to sell their animals, it's the hardest part of our business. The hardest thing we do is getting people to let go of these animals. So I don't know if anybody in here collects anything. Is there anybody in here that collects, say, okay, collect guns or coins or artifacts? So do you want to sell that stuff? Sure. Yeah, most people that collect stuff don't sell it. They're emotionally invested in it. They love it. They may do some trading with somebody, but they don't want to sell it. And we end up with collectors. They're collecting animals, and while maybe they sell some to pay the feed bill or sell some to get a little revenue, trying to get people to sell animals is really difficult because they grow emotionally attached to that little zebra that their wife saw born, and then it grew up, and oh wow, now it's pregnant, and we're going to be a grandma. And so it's really difficult to get them to do it. And the other part is it's very invasive. People don't like feeling invaded. They don't like feeling like someone's invading their property and flying a helicopter and moving their animals around. And so that is the biggest part of what we struggle with. So the consumption around exotic wildlife is mortality from natural causes, it's mortality from mismanagement, and it's mortality as the result of poor capture practices. And that mortality, it keeps the playing field somewhat level and it keeps demand moving forward. So I don't know if that answers your question or not. Okay. I'm not going to go through these charts. I'm just going to tell you what they are. These are the populations in AZA zoos. So if you look at the 4 or 5 handouts that are there, you're going to see that the AZA touts themselves as the king of conservation. They're better than everybody else. They're smarter than everybody else. They do it right, we do it wrong. Those people in Texas are a bunch of Bubba idiots. We don't even want to acknowledge them, but we're going to send them our stepkids every month. We have more animals than all of them. Like, our populations here in Texas are astronomically larger than the AZA. WildLife Partners, by itself, has more animals than the entire AZA combined as it relates to hoof stock. So our one company is housing more animals than every single American city zoo combined as it relates to hoof stock. So the point that I'm making is this is the origin of where our animals came from. They're sending us a few animals as we go, but it's very few. They are not impacting our industry in a significant way because they can't. They don't have enough animals to do it. So breeding, again, is the only way that we can grow our industry. And the better we get at healthcare, the better we get at taking care of the animals, the better we are at breeding our breeding practices. So there is going to be a saturation point someday. When that's coming, I can't tell you when it's coming. I don't know when it's coming. I know that in South Africa, it's when they reached more than 20 million animals. And we're a long ways from that. So the last thing I'll say about that, and then I'm going to wrap this up, is that one of the factors that we have that the South Africans didn't have is that when you're talking about the tax strategy, they did get to take some tax write-offs, but those all stayed contained within the ranch. They were not able to utilize the tax write-offs that they were getting on income of other businesses. It all stayed within the ranch. We get the benefit of taking losses that we generate on our ranches, and we can offset income from our jobs, our businesses, other things that we do. So that one factor all by itself means that I don't actually even have to make money on animals. I don't have to. If all I do is break even on the animals, but I'm saving 37% on taxes as my upside, I'm winning. So if all I do is get my money back on my animals, I don't even make any money on it, I'm still making money because of all the depreciation and all of the expenses that I'm getting on all these other things that I'm doing on my property that otherwise was non-deductible. So we have an economic advantage over the South Africans when it comes to financial structure. I don't know what impact that will have on the viability of where saturation is. I don't know, but I do think it will have an impact. So I'll wrap this up. I'm not going to go through the remainder of these little slides because we do have to stay on schedule. But the long and the short of it is we have a very robust industry. Think about what you're doing when you're buying. Don't be willy-nilly and make irrational decisions. Make sure you know who you're selling to. Make sure you know who you're buying from. Ask a lot of questions. Hold people accountable. Make them warranty animals when they're selling them to you. And if you need help with tax strategy, just reach out and we'll be happy to help you. Does anybody have any questions before I wrap up? Yes, sir. Yeah, great. It's a great question. So when you're talking about ag exemptions on your property, in other words, you're trying to get out of having to pay property tax. This is not income tax, this is property tax. Several different things that you can do to accomplish that. One of them is a wildlife management plan, okay? And there's people here that help with that. This is not a wildlife management plan. This is livestock. The problem that we have in the state of Texas is there's no uniformity from county to county. So if you go from one county to the next county to the next county, they view exotic wildlife differently. They are obligated to allow you to use it as a livestock exemption, but the number of animals that they require you to have varies based on county. But you can pull online, there's data that you can acquire that demonstrates what an impala is related to a cow. In other words, a livestock unit is theoretically a mama cow, if you will. So an impala is like 0.2 mama cows. Well, there's a chart that shows this for all African species. So if you take this to your county tax office and you show it to them in relation to what it is that you're doing, if they don't have a protocol in place already, which many of them do, we have found that in most cases they will honor that if you show it to them. But every county is a little different. It just depends on the county you're in. The EWA has been working, trying to get something done on this. They've not been successful thus far. Yes. So the industry standard in our industry is no one is paying sales tax across the board. There is an argument about whether or not that's valid based on food and fiber and whether the animals are deemed food and fiber. I have been really aggressive with the Exotic Wildlife Association, asking them to work with lobbyists in order to address this issue, to get rid of the gray area that exists within the law. I have been completely unsuccessful in doing so. So I would encourage all of you, everyone in this room, if you're doing this, this is an issue that needs to get resolved at the legislative level. So we either need to come together and do this ourselves because it doesn't appear that we're getting a lot of movement with the EWA, but it is a looming bear that we have to address because no one is paying sales tax. And there is a gray area as to whether or not we're obligated to do so. So it is an unresolved issue that needs to be addressed. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. He's right here in front in the hat. You do wildlife management plans, correct? Mickey? Mickey does that, so feel free to reach out to him. Joe Bailey in the back also can assist you with that. So both, they've talked together, and I don't know that they work together on things, but either one of them have the ability to help with wildlife management plans. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Sure. If you have a business card or some, leave them, make sure that people can get them. Joe, I know Joe's got some, make sure that they're available. So yes. And we can reach out to us afterwards. We can connect anybody with anybody. So feel free to do so. Any other questions? Okay, with that, I am going to go ahead and ask Dr. Morfeld to come up. And I went about 20 minutes over, so you don't have to